Welcome to the Elite FTS Strength Plus podcast, educating and outfitting the strongest athletes around the world.
All right, Dave, you remember the first thing you said to me yesterday as an intern, my first day on the job?
No.
Okay, well, you told me that you hated podcasting.
Yeah.
And that there were multiple piles of podcasting shit laying all over the compound. So, what do you hate about it? We dove into this a little bit before we actually started here, but what keeps you away from it?
I've done a multitude of podcasts as far as a guest.
Yes.
And so from that standpoint, no, I really don't hate it because somebody else is kind of doing it. Now, I think I've done every podcast I've ever been asked, unless they're two things. If they're sending me an invite and it's a spam invite, and then I have to schedule myself on their own calendar, I delete it.
Okay.
Because it's just, if they're not even inept enough
Yes.
to write a personal invite, and it's something that you can tell. I just got one today, actually, that said, hey, I want to do a podcast with you. Here's what we want to discuss. Boom, boom. It's very general, and I didn't want to discuss the second part of it at all, which was the biggest business mistakes that you've made. It was completely a spam letter. The only thing that was changed was the name.
Okay.
And then it was, feel free to schedule yourself. I'm like, no, fuck you,
So they're just shooting it out there to everybody.
Yeah, and so that could be, I didn't even look to see what the podcast was, but that could be a top 10 podcast, who knows?
Yeah.
But just the approach, it's like, I'm not gonna do it. Meanwhile, if somebody actually, I've had many of them just send me a request on Instagram saying, hey, will you do my podcast? Just because it's a personal ask, sure, I'll do it. I know they may have 2 people that listen to them, but I'll do it.
Okay.
Now on the other side, the reason why I don't like podcast is the reason I've never liked them to begin with is I hate having something that needs to be scheduled. I've worked my whole life to try to not have to be at a certain place at a certain time. I can do a lot of work. I work a lot of hours, but it's pretty much when and where I want to be able to do it. Certain meetings, if they're here, business-wise, there's one that I've not attended yet, which is on Wednesday mornings, which I'm changing my schedule around to attend. But I'm okay with that. But if I was to look at my calendar and it's like meeting, I would rather fucking shoot myself. And I think that comes from being a personal trainer for so many years and having people scheduled from 5 a.m. till 9 every day. And I work better when I can focus on just a couple things every day and get them done instead of having disruption. So to me, a podcast would be one of those things that, okay, every Tuesday and Thursday at this time, it has to be done, especially if it's a live type of thing. And that would just drive me nuts. And then even if you are smart about it and you try to get a couple ahead, just for sickness, vacations, or whatever it is, it's still lingering there for me. And it's like,
Yes.
That's the first part. The second part now is, and I don't know what's caused the pendulum to swing harder towards podcasts, but everybody's doing there's like 4 new ones that I see every day. And it's like, oh my God, then I'll listen to some of them and I don't like the chatty bullshit. I love talking to people and chatting with people, but if I'm a listener of a podcast, I'm listening. I have 2 choices if I'm driving someplace. 3. I'm either going to listen to music or I'm listening to an audiobook, or maybe it's a podcast. I don't want to spend 20 to 30 minutes listening to 2 people talk about irrelevant shit that's not going to help me. I would rather listen to music because I know I'm going to enjoy that. I may or may not enjoy the conversation that they have. Now, if it's got content in it, which is good. I can just skip through, the first part and go from there. But I don't know if it's become easier to do them than it used to be, which is why everybody's starting it, because it really seems like podcasts are ramping up at a rapid rate.
I can relate to that in a sense, because when I do my own, and when I've done my own in the past, all it takes is just an iPhone. You put the iPhone down and you have a conversation. I get a lot out of those conversations. Most of them are very spontaneous, and I think that's kind of the beauty of this. We just decided to do this yesterday. So I think maybe we'll get something out of it in that sense, since it's not something that's lingering. We're not thinking about it for weeks ahead of time, and we're just going to see where it takes us.
Yeah, and in the past, it wasn't that. We have, as you start digging through things, thousands of dollars worth of radio and podcast equipment that, just to do one in the past, would take the person that was doing it the time to actually do the podcast, and then the fucking week of editing, to go through and edit every single thing. And for me, it got frustrating, because it's like, come on, man, it shouldn't be this complicated. High school kids are doing it. It shouldn't be this complicated. Then we found a more simplified version, but you'll lose a little audio when you do that as well, the sound.
I think the quality of the equipment, like even an iPhone now, it picks up that sound just beautifully. So you hit on a certain point during that little conversation there. I'm in a psychology class this semester as part of my degree. Does that having a set schedule, or having that podcast 2 weeks down the road, does that affect your ability to be creative and be an effective leader? Do you feel?
No, not in the office. It's just it may affect the podcast. That if I knew it was going to be a regular thing, and if it was something, I should probably step back. And if it was something that the staff decided, from the media department, this is something that should be done, then yes, I will make time to get it done. They direct that department. I'm just kind of the little mule that, we need to do a table talk, or we need to do this, and then I'll find a way, to get it done, usually after they've exhausted all the stuff that they have to publish. But that will get done. Now with a podcast, I would need more time to prep, because it's not like we can just pull questions from people to answer like the table talks are, which are shot in, short things, where a podcast would work if it was a conversational type podcast, where, if we're doing this and we're having a conversation, and then content comes out from that conversation, that's obviously much easier. If that wasn't the case and I just had to speak straight into a microphone, then I would have to prepare extensively to be able to do that, kind of like I would when a lot of my articles are dictated. So it's kind of, I'm already doing it in a way, because I'm dictating the article, and then I'm having it transcribed, and then I'm going back and rewriting it, and that's just the easier way to be able to get a lot of the articles done.
Okay, so you're kind of just talking into the phone or something initially. Okay, that's
then I send it off and then get the transcription back.
I've done that, just notes throughout the day. I think it's a pretty good way to do that. Something I mentioned before you went down that road was creativity. I think as a leader of a company like this, or any other company, it's very important to be able to be creative and find that creative niche, whatever that may be for you. So I guess, what approaches have you taken? What's worked for you? What's not worked for you as far as creativity goes? Some people think it's a process, and others feel that it's spontaneous and it just comes out of nowhere. So I'd be interested
for
to hear.
me, it's spontaneous and it comes out of nowhere, but to double back a little bit, we've hired creative people. And one thing that I will not do, and it's actually more an effort to pull the creativity out of them. So I'm very careful on, say, if it's an idea that I want to pitch on, and if you speak to Josh, Sheena, and anybody else that's ever worked in the media department, it's probably a little frustrating to them because I'm going to pitch the idea, then I'm going to backpedal like a motherfucker because I want them to come up with the concept and roll with it from there. Then when they ask for approval, they get very general answers because they were hired for their creativity. That's what was vetted out. So I want them to use that to the full knowledge and build it. And if it's not good, it's going to be not good because they felt it wasn't good, not because I felt it wasn't good. And we don't let clicks dictate that. We let the work kind of speak for itself, when that's being done or the ideas are being done. And I don't jump on their ass to say, look, you need to be creative or come up with a new concept, because that's not how it works.
Okay.
If you were forced, like, I need a new concept by tomorrow, 5. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
The shit comes when you're driving or in a shower or whatever it is. And that's where you need to have a device to write it down or to tackle it. For my own creativity, it's more from the blog that I write. That's probably where I put in all of my unvetted, creativity, because the table talks are answering other people's questions. Articles are usually writing about something that is relevant at the time. Mm-hmm. A blog is just whatever the fuck I'm thinking about when I sit down. Those just come off the top of my head. If it is one where I recently posted my whole training process for 2016, that's been on my list, a blog post to make since January.
Okay.
Because it's one of those things, like, I know I need to write this, I know, and it wasn't there. It's like, I don't want to write about this. I don't want to do this right now. Where 150 other blogs probably posted before that, then it was like, if I don't force this and get this done, we're going to be in like 2018. So that was a lot harder to write, because it was like writing an article to me. It's forced writing. Yeah. And when I used to write for other sites and magazines, it's kind of like that, because you got a deadline and here's the topic and you got to kind of force write. And I don't enjoy that as much. I mean, my main role is running the company. It's not really writing the blog or any of the other stuff. Mm-hmm. So I try to leave the creativity to the people that were hired for the creativity.
Okay. I see that, but I feel at the same time that you're much more creative than you may be giving yourself credit for.
Yeah.
Because I think it takes a lot of that to be able to lead a company, like you mentioned, and to direct and kind of have that oversight and long-term vision. And I think you communicated a lot of that in the vision, or under the bar, those publications. So. And
I agree with that. And there's certain times where I kind of, in my own narrative, mm-hmm. I call it overstepping the bounds. So if I start to see my creativity and my vision starting to bubble up mm-hmm. too much, it becomes too much of the voice of the company.
I see.
Then I pull back.
I see.
Because the voice of the company is elitefts. It's just, I'm a figurehead of the company. I should not be the main voice of the company. That does happen. I mean, we've been in business almost 20 years, so that does happen. And when it does, especially over the last decade, last 5-10 years, I've had to pull it back to let, the team members and the staff, to let their voices come through to represent. So it is a battle's a bad word, but it is a balancing act of, I've not been boisterous, is that a word? I've not been, loud enough.
Okay.
My voice isn't enough. I need to do an article. The articles have the biggest pop, the biggest bang for the buck. Blogs do, but not to the same readership extent.
Yeah.
So I gauge it that way. So if I think it needs more, then but so it's a balancing. So that in itself mm-hmm. is creative.
Okay, no, exactly. that whole method that you just went through to kind of lay that out was it's not something that I've heard before. So as far as I heard Dave was in an isolation tank earlier today. What's that all about? What's the driver there? I think we'll kind of hit a softer subject here. And
it's a float tank. It's a deprivation tank, isolation tank, whatever you want to call it. When I was in high school, I was part of a study at the University of Toledo that was dealing with that for sport performance. And I was powerlifting at the time, and it kind of bridged the time when I was still in school to the summer after I graduated from school. And it was close to, it's going so far back, 30 weeks or something like that. It was a lot. And it was on that, but it was really more on sport performance and visualization. So it was using the sensory deprivation tank to be able to visualize better than how that would impact sport performance. So there was visualization work, meditation, visualization, however you want to define that, that was done outside of the tank, but the tank was used to try to help with it. And it did greatly, because I went from whenever somebody starts visualizing, and I'll use powerlifting as an example because that's what it was. I would try to visualize the bench or the squat and I couldn't see it. It's just a dark mess and my mind's all over the fucking place. And then, I got to a point where I could begin to see it, but then the barbell would float and spin and, it wasn't doing anything that I wanted it to do. Okay. And the tank helped that tremendously. It took time. It took a couple months, but it got to the point where everything was vivid and colors started to come through, which is usually pretty rare when it's dealing with visualization. And they had cueing as well, that was going through. So
they're letting you know kind of what steps to take and
kind of helping me get into the hole, into that state to be able to get there and to relax and so forth. And over the period of time, I don't want to say it was the total reason, but the meet that I did 10 months later was probably to this day one of the best meets I ever had in my life. I went 9 for 9. I didn't miss a single lift. Every third attempt was 40 to 50 pounds more than what I thought I was able to do. I took a 5-pound personal record on my second attempt and just kind of left the thirds for fuck it. Yeah. Let's see how it goes, and let the guy who was my training partner at the time call those, and ended up doing things. I'm like, holy fuck, and I kind of equate it to Caddyshack when the guy's out on the golf course and he's just having the game of his life without getting struck by lightning at the end. I still survived. But
so that's something you've done through the years consistently?
No,
take a break,
no. I did it, and I got to a point where I still visualized training sessions before I did them. I've always kind of done that. I stopped doing that probably around 90. Actually, I stopped doing it when I came to train at Westside because I didn't know what the fuck we were going to do. That was the methodology that was there. So if I visualized the max effort exercise, we didn't know what the fuck we were going to do when we got in there. So it's like, what the hell am I going to I couldn't do it because I didn't know what to do. So with that, I noticed at that time that if I just focused and visualized the main lift before I did it, or if it was the dynamic effort work, just 5 seconds before I did the set, it came right like that. Okay. I could close my eyes, see it, and it's there. So I didn't need to visualize the whole training session beforehand. I found that I can do this in 5 seconds. Yeah. If I'm just stop, I need to be stopped, stop so there's no movement. I need to be stopped, stable, and safe, not thinking that I'm going to get hit in the head with a plate or something like that's going to drop on my foot. It doesn't take long. Okay. It just takes a few seconds, and then visualize the lift and then go do it. That I continued to do all the way until today. If it's a challenge set, most training is just training. Okay. But if it's a challenge set or if it's something that I need to be at a different state, it's pretty easy for me to do.
Did it take you a lot of time to be able to build up to the point where it only took 5 seconds? Or was that?
I didn't even know I could do it. Okay. I didn't even know I could do it because I never did. Because everything I did was always pre-meet or pre-training. And then during the meet, I was always, I guess, afraid to visualize it because what if it fucked up? If I fucked it up in my head, I'd fuck it up on the platform. So I already knew I've already did it thousands of times or hundreds of times in my mind. that was the day to actually execute and do it. So I didn't really see the point of rehearsing again if I already did it hundreds of times successfully. It was basically game time, it was time to execute. Where it came back in is a friend of mine told me about 2 centers in town, which are what the hell are they called? Float spa. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, what the hell, can it help for joints is what I went out there for. I went out there for 2 things. I went out there to see if I could lower my heart rate. Okay. It's kind of like Hannibal Lecter, made himself almost like that. Yeah. How cool would that be to do, So if I could go out there and visualize and get my, mentally get my heart rate, to lower, regulate and so forth, that could have value. The other part of it is the joint, because you're floating, so there's no
non-weight bearing. Yeah.
Non-weight bearing. Yeah. I mean, gravity still is kind of on you, but you're floating. So how would that make my joints feel? Because they're fucked. And then if I was in that environment and I did P&F stretching or some type of active stretching with my shoulder, could I get it to a greater range of motion than I could get otherwise? And I have. So for the past few months, I try to get in there once a week. If I go for a second session, I'll actually listen to an audio book. Okay. So I can absorb it better and
more of a relaxation type of thing, maybe, or
you can learn better.
Okay.
Because there's I don't use the lights, I don't use the music. There's nothing. There's no cell phones, there's no kids, there's nothing. So you kind of go batshit crazy if you don't know what's going on and it's your first time in there, where I think a lot of these spas, clubs, or whatever it is, will give the first float for free. Okay. Because it does freak some people out because they're so used to noise, in their life, and there's nothing.
Well, I'm going to give it a shot. You've convinced me. You've convinced me. Hopefully the audience here is as well. But kind of going in a different direction here, and I'm going to read a little bit of this because I don't have it all in my head. But Elite FTS, they've made in my opinion, made quite the statement over these 20 years of existence here. And I think we're coming into kind of an interesting time. I'm glad to be around for it, for sure. With the move, with the Fitness Professionals Summit coming up, all of that kind of being boxed into these few months here, which makes it very exciting and stressful all at the same time, I would imagine. But in an industry just filled with what's seemingly just constant, streams of bullshit wherever you look. And me coming from a kitchen cabinet industry where there wasn't much bullshit, it was all pretty straightforward. What do you feel is driving that at this point?
The bullshit?
Yeah.
Ease of entry.
Think so?
It's easy to have a voice. Anybody can have a voice. When I first got online, there were only a couple other sites that were educational for strength and conditioning. Okay. There were a lot of forums, not a lot, but it's funny because I say a lot of forums because there might have been like 5 or 6, which at the time was a lot, but now there's thousands of groups, that you can go to. But there wasn't, and you kind of knew which forums were good, which ones weren't. And then from the content side of articles and so forth, there might have been outside of, well, we were even before that, but a lot of the print magazines weren't even online yet. And if they were, it was just more of a banner site to try to get people to subscribe to the magazine. So we were publishing articles, T-Nation was publishing articles, I think bodybuilding.com was publishing articles, and there might have been a few other ones, but that was really about it. So what was still there during the earlier years, the first 5-10 years, was a vetting process. I mean, we still use a vetting process, but you didn't get published unless you knew what the fuck you were doing. or your article didn't get published unless it was a good article that somebody read and said there's value there. I'm not going to sit here and say that articles weren't published across all these sites by people who may or may not have been qualified to really be a coach. Okay. But if it's just one piece of content and it's one article and it's good and that's qualified, that's enough to be published, you know, in my opinion. Okay. Because a lot of times those articles will come from students who are in the learning stages of their life. I mean, they're just absorbing, and then they find a topic and they're obsessed with it and they learn all they can about it, and then they write about it because it helps them learn about it. Now, they may not be the greatest coach in the world or the strongest person in the world, but that piece of content is really good. And I never wanted to dismiss that. I don't think any of the other sites really dismissed that as well. But it was still vetted, you know, it was read, you know, is this good? Is it something that we want to publish that fits the narrative of the site and of what we're trying to do? And other sites were like that. So it wasn't easy to be able to be published, but what it added was a layer of credibility, a filter of credibility. That if you were published, and it's just like in the magazine, like magazines were before the internet. If you were published in a magazine, there's a pretty good chance that you knew what you were talking about. Not always, because there were ghostwriters. Nothing's what it seems, you know, so there were ghostwriters out the ass. And like I said, we still vet the articles that come in. Once they're a columnist, we really don't have to do the vetting because we vetted the person to become on the team to write as a columnist. But the outside submissions get vetted, you know, and if they're close, we'll help them, you know, tie up the content a little bit. Whereas not 10 years ago, maybe, you know, WordPress came out, so it was simple, easy, free to just set up your own Tumblr, you know, all these different means to be able to set up your own blog. So then anybody had a blog. And while it's a great way as a publisher to vet, you know, is the person's content good, what if you don't know? You know, what if you're that beginner that doesn't know what's good and what's not good? And then social media hit, you know, and then from there, the length of the content got smaller, which makes it easier for people to fake their stupidity. Yeah. You know, because it's not lengthened. And so that's why there's a lot of noise, because there's more content, there's more means of it, and at the same time, much of the readers have gotten lazy, you know, and don't want to take the time to learn, just kind of want to be told, where for most times, that's probably okay. But if you want to be amongst the best at what you do, you're gonna have to learn. It doesn't matter if it's cabinetry or, you know, lifting weights or being a strength and conditioning coach. You know, there comes a point where you're gonna have to take that next step and, you know, not be the student, so to say, but, you know, to be a little bit of a leader and to seek out your own content, try to validate the content and go from there. But even with all the noise, and this is an argument and a debate that's been going on since social media started, you know, there's too much noise, there's too much crap that, you know, the beginners don't know what to think. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. You know, they have to be extremely arrogant or ignorant to not know what's complete bullshit. And yes, some people will fall for that, you know, but that's not the target market we go towards. So that we don't deal with that a whole lot. Okay. But, you know, it's not that hard over a period of time where if you go back and look at somebody's history to see, is this bullshit or not? And even if you question it, you know, you're starting to read something, you're a quarter of the way through, and you're like, man, that alone tells you it's probably bullshit. Yeah. You know, yeah. So, or if it seems too good to be true. So that's been the change over the 20 years is, you know, how to navigate the noise. And from our standpoint, we just kind of ignore it because you can get too you can only control what you can control. We can control the content that we put out. I can't control the content anybody else puts out, nor do I really look to even see what it is. So I authentically don't care because I'm not looking at it. Now, we're also in a world where a lot of people like to say they don't give a shit, and they'll post they don't give a shit. If they really didn't give a shit, they wouldn't have read the post.
Yeah.
Just by saying they don't give a shit is validation to the fact that they do give a shit.
Yeah.
So to me,
and it's gaining, viewers for whatever the issue was. Yeah.
To me, it's always been a funny statement to listen to, because, there's a lot of things I don't give a shit about, but I can't tell you what they are.
Yeah.
Because I'm not reading it.
That's a good point. So maybe I'm reading too much of the noise then.
It could be.
That's why I brought it up.
And if it's things that, frustrate you and, sidetrack you, then it is noise. And, I don't read a lot of current events. I don't read a lot of news and so forth. And I don't want to tell everybody that that's what they should do, because you probably should be informed.
Well, that makes me feel great as a journalism intern here.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I read the things that I want to read and that I need to read to become better. I don't get caught up in, spending hours reading the Huffington Post or BuzzFeed or, anything like that. I don't bother with it. And where some people probably spend too much time doing that. And if they do that, it's amazing. Everybody's got the same amount of time each day, but it's amazing how much time you really have if you're not cluttering your head with a bunch of the noise and a bunch of the bullshit just for entertainment value or just to get caught up or whatever it is. You open up an immense amount of time. And that can be spent doing absolutely nothing, which is relaxing your mind, floating in a tank, or it can be spent being creative yourself. Or educating yourself.
So as kind of an outsider, it sounds like there's definitely been an evolution through the years as far as the vetting process and the people you bring in and kind of the turns that you make. So at the point where we're living, learning, passing on, the vision, the mission, all of that. What do you think that next level looks like for Elite FTS? We're stepping into a new building. A few minutes down the road. It's awesome. I got to see that today, so I got to see the guys working on that, and that was a good experience. But what do you think that looks like in your opinion, or do you not?
The same,
Yeah.
because we've never changed what we do. We've never changed a mission of the company or the aim of the company. We've never had to reinvent ourselves. We've never had, of course you have to pivot, you have to navigate as you go through any economy or any, business situation, but so I really don't see, I don't want to sit here and say more of the same, because you have to evolve as you get bigger, but I don't see dramatic changes or anything, of that nature. It's just, I see a more comfortable environment, so people aren't stacked on top of each other, and having a building that we don't have to pay rent on, worry about if the landlord will do this or not do this, and when you own it, it comes with its own increased stress, but it also comes with a lot of benefits in regards to what you want to do and how you want to move forward. To me, there's really no increased degree of responsibility. There's the drive to increase the media size. If I have anything that's fucked up from a business owner standpoint, I always want to grow the media side, actually more than I want to grow the commerce side, but the media side really doesn't bring the revenue. So,
Yeah.
It's kind of fucked up, but that's what, from a vision standpoint, we're nowhere close to where I want to be from that standpoint.
Okay.
But you need the revenue to be able to do that, and
It's interesting because you also need that to
drive
build the revenue.
So
Yeah.
it's a circle.
Yeah.
It's cyclical. So it's how it works, and when to add who, when, at what time, to be able to make sure that that's working in the right direction, and not driving the expenses up faster than the income, and, navigating that thing.
Okay. From what I've gathered, most of the target audience or our consumers here are between 20 and 50. Would you maybe agree with that?
Maybe a little older.
Maybe a little older?
Yeah. The way I define our target audience is there's going to be people who would place training as one of the top 4 priorities in their life. So that could be a competitor, to where it's going to be first or second. It could be a coach. It could be a personal trainer, because if that's how they're making their living, it's probably a top priority. Once you fall out of the top 4 priorities, then they're really not our audience. There's other companies that handle that and to deal with that. So it's a smaller demographic, because it's not really a demographic where you can sit and say, and it's always been this way. So I should step back and say this was the vision from the very beginning, was to never have to deal with the absolute beginners, because if we work with the people who do work with the absolute beginners, we're covering them from the educational standpoint. But with that mission in mind, we can't sit here and say our target market is strength coaches, because yeah, it is, that's a demographic, but it's only the strength coaches that give a fuck about what they're doing. If it's, a football coach who's got a side job as a strength coach and he really doesn't even care about it, he's just sitting in the weight room, watching people, that's really not our target. Our target isn't to convince that guy to do a better job. Our target is the guy who's in the weight room, that loves being in the weight room, that's his passion, and he wants to make the kids stronger. Whereas, as powerlifting has grown as a sport over the last, since 2012, it's picked up as a sport, there's a lot more recreational lifters than ever before. So they really don't fall into our target market, because to them, it's like, I call them laser tag lifters. Okay. It's like laser tag to somebody who really doesn't give a shit about laser tag. They're just kind of doing it because they may like it, may not like it. Once it becomes a priority, then we're the target. Usually that's how people find us. Is once it becomes a priority, it's easier to find Elite FTS. If you just go on the web, and this has been orchestrated on purpose as well, if you go on the web and you just want to search strength training or any of that, you're probably not going to find us right away. There's all that other noise above it that you'll stumble around with for a while, and then you'll find your way.
Okay. Kind of going along the same lines of audiences and generations, a big topic lately in some of my classes has been the generational gap, or the issues that people and companies are having with millennials, which is, I identify with that group. But do you think that gap is real or perceived?
Perceived.
You think so?
Yeah. I think it's perceived, and it's being driven by the media, because I've had Gen Xers that just suck, that have no motivation whatsoever. I've trained with them that just suck, and keep in mind that Gen Xers were the ones that, the ones prior, to us were saying that we were fucking lazy. So you can't define a whole fucking generation as being one thing. That's just think about it for a minute. It's just fucking stupid.
Hey, I agree. I just had to ask.
It's just fucking ignorant. Are there millennials that fit, the definitions that are being put out there? Of course. Are there ones that don't? Of course. Are there Gen Xers that fit those exact same negative qualities that they'll put out for millennials? Fuck yeah. I know a ton of them that do. So at the end of the day, it comes down to the person across the table, the person that you're eating with, or the person that you're communicating with. Do they have those qualities? Do they not? Because communication, there's something called personal communication. It's at a personal level. And marketing is going to be more broad, but if your target audience is set and you know what that is based upon what you really do, and that's where a lot of companies fuck up, is they don't know what business they're really in. You know, I can sit here and say we're in e-commerce. Well, so's 1,000 fucking other people.
Yeah.
You know, we're in the business of helping, you know, coaches, trainers, athletes who trains the top 4 priority get better. I mean, that's what we sell. The equipment we sell, the education we provide is targeted towards them. You know, that's the business we are in. We are in that educational business for that market. That's cut and dry. It's very
regardless of their age or
yeah,
where they're from or whatever.
You know, right now and over a period of time, the driver for that has been e-commerce. But who's to say that driver, you know, doesn't change over time? The products always change. You know, the consumer demand for the products is always going to change. But that's not the business we're in. You know, the business we're in is that. And that's why I think that we've survived for 2 decades, whereas a lot of other companies don't, because they think they're in the e-commerce. I'm in e-commerce to make money. Fucking great. Now you're competing with everybody else. You know, truly define what your business is, and then you are going to have a niche, and you're going to be able to build trust and loyalty with the consumers that you're marketing to, as long as you don't change what business you're really in, you know, for really as long as you want. Now, it may not skyrocket and become this multi-million, gazillion-dollar business, but you're pretty much always going to be around. Now, that has nothing to do with if they're Gen Xers, Gen Y, Gen X, baby boomers, millennials. It has nothing to do with that, you know.
And I can speak to that. Just being here during a seminar, and you see all these different age groups working together at one squat rack. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's incredible, and I think maybe that's what we're missing in that respect, is conversations like this.
Yes.
Between older and younger folks, and I think that could have a big impact.
Well, if you know, the aim of the company forever has been, as you noted, to live, learn, and pass on. If we're to accept the definition of millennials, like, okay, you know, they don't want to learn. They're, you know, I don't even know what half of these things.
You don't listen to it, right?
I can't even define it. So,
yeah.
You know, if we're to accept that, then who the fuck exactly are we to pass on to?
Yeah. Eventually, you're going to run out of.
You know, and that's, you know, as I speak in the seminars, that's a huge thing, because, you know, the people today, you know, are reaping the harvest of that was planted 20 years prior, you know. So I think that's something that consistently always gets forgotten, where people don't want to pass on or help younger generations, so they'll make excuses that they don't want to be taught, they don't want to be this, they're this, they're this, they're this, because they don't want to take it upon themselves to pass on to them what they learn, because they want more, you know, for themselves. But they fail to realize that the trees they're sitting on, and the, you know, swings they're sitting on, the grass they're walking on,
Yes.
you know, the shade that's being covered, you know, and strength and conditioning, just the ability to be a personal trainer or a strength coach didn't exist 30, 40 years ago. All right, so those professions were created by the people over here that are now in their 60s, 70s, you know, 80s, that were training people, you know, in the gym, which created the foundation. They planted the seeds for what we see today, which is, it's a profession. People are making an actual living off training people, which I remember when I was going through college, and my degree was structured based upon independent studies of exercise science and nutrition, and me being asked, what do you want to do? And I wanted to train people, and they said, there's no, what job does that? I don't give a fuck. All I cared about was becoming stronger myself and learning about how to get stronger myself. But it really wasn't even a track where you could say, I want to go to school to be a trainer, because the only real trainers were celebrity trainers, and they were far and few and very rare. And there really wasn't a whole lot of strength coaches, so the profession didn't exist. So I think that if you want to classify Gen X as the Gen X generation kind of owes it to the guys that weren't even able to make a living off what they were doing. They had to go do their full-time, laborious job or whatever job they were doing. And then if they wanted to help the high school or the school, they were doing that secondary for no income, and now you got people who that's how they make their living, don't they owe? So the seeds that they plant today aren't for them. And I think they spend a lot of time kind of planting seeds and looking down saying, why is this shit not growing? Yeah. Then they get frustrated because it's not growing, so they stop, not realizing they're planting it for our children, for the future. And what I don't want to see, at least in the strength and conditioning profession, is people start laying concrete, because that leaves nothing for the millennials or whatever you want to call the next generation coming up after that. What are we leaving for them, to be able to make the profession better than what it is now? Because it can get better. We all know where it's fucked up about it, so we determine if it gets better by what we plant, what we leave for them.
Interesting thought. Kind of going in a different direction here. We've got the Fitness Professional Summit coming up, I believe October 21st, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pumped because I'll still be around for that in October. And I've got the speaker guest list here, and I was wondering if you'd be comfortable if I just name off each name, if you'd be willing to do like a sentence just to describe your relationship or the impact that person's had on you. Okay, so Rachel Balkovec.
She is the first female Major League Baseball strength coach to ever be hired. So that alone speaks volumes for what she brings to the table. Her history before that, working with the teams and the athletes that she did, why she got there. So just being a female, navigating their way through the strength and conditioning field is filled with adversity, because it's getting better because of people like her, a male-dominated, what do I want to say, workplace, environment.
There you go. There you go.
So it's really hard to crack through, but because of her, and others like her, it's become much easier for women to break through and to get positions like that, which is extremely important for many reasons. I don't want to sit here and say that, all female strength coaches I've seen are smarter than the males, but, I can stack up a bunch of them,
yep.
And there's a lot of males that have a really hard time filling the same experience and education and credentials that they do. So to me, it's great to see that this is happening, but from her standpoint, for her to be able to share that, and to be able to tell her story and to be able to, inspire others to follow the same passion that she had, so they're not diverted, into a different direction if that's what they really want to do, because it's possible, and she proved it, and, others since have proved it. So that's what's going to be great about her is, with any prosperity comes adversity. So I think that those stories of adversity and how to overcome it, how to be patient, how to work hard, and the steps that are necessary on when to be patient, when to be assertive, I can't answer those, for a female, nor can any other male coach. She can. And that I think is going to be awesome for the female attendants. From the male attendants, she knows strength and conditioning, so anybody that's been around as long as she's been around at the success that she has, you can learn from that. And being a business summit, she does a lot of, personal branding with speaking and so forth as well. And she's in the media, obviously, quite a bit. So there's a lot to be learned from her, just from PR, and human resources and all that as well. So really looking forward to hearing her speak.
That's exciting. I am as well. Let's go Mark Manga next on the list here.
Man, I met Mark, I don't even know how long ago, but one of our sponsors at the time introduced me to him, and he was just getting into it. I mean, he was a competitor, or I think he was a competitor at the time, former football player, and wanted to train athletes. And I had a little mentoring thing with him out here where we talked and kind of, I'm not going to say I guided his vision, but I get people to kind of tell me what their vision is, and then go do it. And he had a really good understanding of where he wanted to go. And this was, I wish I could name the date, but I would say probably a decade ago. And he did it, and this another real cool story to be able to see, that where he's at, where he's going, he's, still hungry to move forward. So again, from a personal branding standpoint, it's a whole nother story that when it comes to business, it's all about, a big part of any business is, what is your story? Why are you doing what you're doing, and how can you relate that where people can relate to that? And he's one of those, they all
Yes.
kind of fit that, but then back it up with the training intelligence as well as the business intelligence to be able to move and grow forward. The tricky thing in this industry is to move forward, you have to have the training intelligence. Usually, for most, they have that first. And then you don't know shit about business. Then you have to learn the business intelligence to be able to, move forward. And then whatever direction you end up going into, if it's coaching, it's, training's still going to be huge. If it's owning and operating a training center or facility, then business is going to become higher than the training. And those are some of the lessons that he'll be able to pass on, to the attendants as well.
So something you mentioned or hit on there was that you kind of served as a mentor for him at one point or another. Did I catch that right?
Yeah, I sat down with him for 3 or 4 hours.
Okay, excellent. As far as someone that's young and maybe struggling, finding exactly where they're headed, or their hedgehog concept, as I like to refer to it, what approach would you take if you were that person to find a mentor? Because I feel like a lot of people in my position, a lot of younger people, that's something that's missing.
It is, and it's hard because the people willing to mentor are already busy, with their own staff and everything else. So I can only really speak for myself personally. I used to sell services, a mentor weekend service that, I think it was $3,000 or something like that. And I felt confident in that price because I knew one of two things. I was either going to be able to help them grow $3,000 of profit and revenue to cover the cost, or I was going to help them save $3,000 worth of mistakes that they were going to do. And in every case, that was more than 4 times the value, but they were really fucking exhausting for me. Okay. And because it was between 36 and 40 hours over 3 days. So
that's a pretty intense.
Yes, and I never wanted more than one person unless they had a trusted staff with them, because reviewing financials is part of this. Okay. So I don't want to have 4 different business owners out here and here's their balance sheet and profit and loss state. It's none of anybody else's fucking business. It's really not even mine. Yeah. It's only mine because I'm helping them to make sure that they're on the right track and there's certain correlations that fit where they should be. So there's a lot of effort that goes into what I was doing with them, because you got to, establish the values that you need to teach them why they're doing what they're doing, as I talked about before, because that's huge. If they don't know that, they're fucked. If they don't know what their core values are, they don't know how to make a decision. So there's so much that goes into it before you even talk about marketing strategies or branding or any of that. And so it's a lot. So it's like every time I did one, I felt good because I felt that, you know, the value was far more than what I offered, but at the same time, I didn't want to ever do another one again because it just fucking wrecked me. Seminars wear me out, but these fucking wrecked me because you have to think, you have to think so hard because I'm trying to extract things they don't want to tell me because that's what I really need to know.
Yeah.
And then come up with ideas that they're going to buy into because I don't know the answers. I'm trying to get the answers out of them. They know the answers, but I got to get them out. And so it's hard because it's not like a normal conversation where you can kind of like, you know, phase out of it and phase into it. It's like, fuck, you're focused on everything, looking for a clue, and you're doing that for 2 days at a time. And
that's,
so then you're going home and writing down everything you can remember and trying. So every time I did it, I increased the price, and people would keep signing up, and it kept increasing the price, and it got to like 10 grand, and then people quit signing up for it. And then I said, okay, fuck it, you know, I don't want to do them. I'll just do them for team members of Elite FTS because that's a benefit of being part of the team and benefit of the staff. So it's already, now with them I have weeks, years, you know, a large period of time. I have the time for them to try something, to make a mistake, and then show them how to learn from it. You know, so it can be done a lot easier. But there's 50 people. I mean, it's, you know, it's not stringent mentoring with all 50. It's, you know, when the issues pop up or usually when they show initiative, it's going to be pretty intense for a couple weeks because I want to see that I'm pushing them a little hard and I want to see what initiative they're going to be able to push back. And if they don't, then I know they're really not serious about what they're doing. And I want them to discover a lot of themselves. So I would say the best way to do that would be to intern, you know, because at least you can get FaceTime and get to know the person.
Yes.
And then to be assertive, to be able to find some way to communicate with the person, because a lot of times, you know, if you're running a business, there's so many things going on at one time, and there's not a whole lot of FaceTime with interns. You know, if it's forced, like you found a way to force it on me.
Yeah,
I'm
loving it.
Then
I'm taking full advantage.
then you create the narrative.
Yes.
So if you can create the narrative, which becomes that first step, the second, third, fourth, fifth, that's easy. It's the first step, which is the hardest to create because it takes a lot of initiative on the part of the person who's looking for the mentor. You know, you just can't email somebody and say, you know, look, will you be my mentor? You got to strategically think, how can you get in front of this person, you know, to be able to just have a conversation so they know who you are, and then follow up over a period of time and kind of go from there. And then once you kind of lock down on one, and if they fit where you're going, then you keep that contact, and then you start looking for others, you know, because a mentor short in time becomes an advisor, in my opinion. And you have to have, if there's one thing that's helped me more than anything in business, it's the advisors that I have. You know, and they don't think the same way that I do. And I have a couple that think fucking totally opposite of what I do. And those are conversations I don't even like to have, but I know I have to have. Because they're not in this industry, they're in different industries, and then they can look at it and say, what the fuck are you talking about? Then I have to explain, this is not a normal industry, but every industry is different than every other industry.
No,
there's no such thing as just business.
Yes.
You know, it's all different, but there's a lot of principles that carry over from one to the other, and there's a lot of insight that somebody outside of your industry can bring, especially if you're having an issue that you need help with. You know, they're going to look at it and they may say, you know what, why is this even an issue?
Yes.
So that alone pisses you off but it makes you step back and say, okay, is it? Is it really?
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes it's not, other times it is. And then they can kind of help you see it from such a different perspective that it's ridiculous.
Kind of opens it all up, I would imagine. Something I wanted to mention, I came to the John Meadows, I I believe it was an underground training session last fall in October, and you got up after the seminar and mentioned a couple of tips or things, and you served as a mentor in a weird way for me at that point. And I know there were like probably 50 of us in here, but I took a lot away from that. And I wish, because I've been here a couple times to different things, and I wish I would have, and what I'm urging, anyone that's in that position, just talk to these people. Because the mistake that I made in those, I could have been 2 or 3 steps ahead of where I am now if I would have taken some initiative, in October.
Yes, there's very few people, very few that won't talk to you.
Yes.
And if they don't, they're a dick and you don't want to be talking to them anyhow. So you're vetting out anyhow.
Yeah.
So there's no loss. There's no negative in what you're suggesting because it's a best case scenario each way. Because it could be somebody that you really want to mentor you, but then you find out this guy's a dick. Yep. Well, then you don't. And now you're done and you move on to the next other than trying to keep chasing the same path. But it takes initiative.
Yes.
And that's a key indicator to anybody that you're going to want to help or that is going to want to be a mentor. Because if you don't have the initiative, then we're all wasting our fucking time helping the person. Because you can't help on initiative. You can say you need to be more proactive, you need to be proactive, but
you get it or you don't.
How do I do that?
Yeah.
I'd have to find the guy in the crowd that's sitting in the corner by himself, not talking to anybody, go out of my way to find them and then convince them that, look, you need to be and take more initiative.
Yeah. Come and talk to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, there are some people that will do that, and I've done that at times. But the odds of somebody doing that is pretty much slim to none compared to the person who's going to come up. Now, the person that's got overly aggressive initiative isn't going to do any better than the person, probably do worse than the person sitting in the corner.
Yeah. And I think once the person does take that initiative, they are taking a next step as far as their mental or their vision, for what they're starting to put it together, in my opinion, which is where I'm kind of at right now. So we'll go down the list here and continue. JL Holdsworth.
Now, I've known JL since we trained at Westside, so I knew JL actually before he came and trained at Westside. I can tell JL stories for hours, but I don't even know where to begin with him. But here's a guy that came to town and lived in his car, so just to train at Westside. So let's forget about the training and just talk about the business aspect. He came to town with nothing. All right, now he's got 2 sport training facilities that are doing very well. The RPR classes that he's doing are doing very well, and he's become a prominent name in the industry. So I know his whole story because I've known him the whole time, and he's helped me as much as I've helped him. So while I can say I've had the same conversations with him that I had with Mark, I've also extracted a ton from him because he's become one of our target, market. So I learned more about that market from him, than really any other resource because he's smack dab right in the middle of it. But nothing was given to him. He had to work for fucking everything. It made a ton of, I'm real big on people making mistakes. I'd rather people not, but if you don't make the mistakes I made, you're going to make your own. Yep. If I can save somebody from making the mistakes I made, then that's fine. But he's learned from them all and continues to learn now. So just his presence should be motivation enough to show somebody that, they can do it. But his story again is going to be able to let people know that it's not so fucking easy either. It's not the easy story everybody thinks it is. And we are, as you said, moving into a facility within the next month or 2. It's taken 20 years to be able to move into a facility that we're going to own. 20 fucking years.
I'm only 26.
That's not really a great success story.
Yeah.
All right. So there's been a lot of shit just to be able to get there. other companies rise faster, grow bigger, and all the other kind of stuff. Those are outliers, in my opinion, because most companies fail within a year. Then out of those that survive, they're lucky to make it 3 years. Very few last 10. Even less last 20. I mean, it just drops from then on out. So it's being able to learn from the mistakes and being able to not just learn from your own mistakes, but to be able to learn from the mistakes of others. And that's actually taken me probably 20 years to learn. I'm just now to a point where I'll spend more time trying to learn from mistakes that other people have done instead of just putting my head down and saying, fuck it, let's see what happens. And I don't think that's being more conservative, it's just being smarter. So JL he's got a great story, and his business mind is, especially over the past 5 years, is for the person who wants to open a training center is second to none. I meet very few people who are as profitable per square foot as what he is. When I talk to other people and they tell me what their revenue is per month, it's JL's is 6 times as high. Wow. And these other people think they're doing well. Mm-hmm. And I'm like,
let's put it in perspective.
Yeah, maybe you need to talk to JL.
Yeah. Okay, Joe DeFranco.
Joe's been around for a long time too. He was one of the very first people that I put on the site. He's kind of gone full circle. So, he started when I met him, he was working as a trainer for Parisi's, and then he launched into his own, and his first club was basically a storage room or a closet with one rack and a bench in somebody else's gym. And then had a couple other moves before he had the DeFranco Training Center that became the most popular. And then after that, he made one more move into a bigger training center, and then shifted the core business to on it and scaled down so he can work now with coaches and his certification program and not so much with the athletes. So that's full circle. Yes. And anybody that trains athletes or works as a personal trainer, there's going to come a time where you're just not as passionate of training the athletes, as you once were, or training the clients as you once were. Some people, Buddy Morris, that's his life, he's always going to be that way. Awesome. It's never going to change, but the majority of people, you get burned out from it. And it takes decades, and you bust your ass. I mean, if you're getting burned out from it in 5 years, well, then it's just because you suck and you don't know how to put in the time to actually get what you want. But he got to a position where it was time to, let that part go and focus on making coaches better. And the cool thing about all that was the demand was there. Mm-hmm. People wanted to learn from him that were the coaches and the trainers in the industry. So it was very wise, for him to do. It's a very smart business move, because his main passion is to help as many people become better coaches as he can, and that he can do that now, and he wants to help as many athletes as they can. I screwed that up. So
you're good.
Yeah, he got into this field to be able to help athletes get better, and then he grew his business and he grew his online presence to be able to help more athletes. So this pivot that he made into helping coaches is actually a way that he's going to help, instead of the 200 or whatever athletes he was training at his facility, thousands. Yes. Because each coach is going to have their own tribe of athletes that they're working with. So he's in a different part of that life cycle, that people can learn from, to be able to see. Because if you're a personal trainer now working in a training center or working for somebody else, do you see yourself doing that when you're 60 years old? People don't know. I mean, if you're running a training center or you're running a gym and you want to beat your head against the wall, every day, and even so after 10 or 15 years, and it's successful, do you see yourself doing that for the rest of your life? Do you feel trapped? Because you should never feel trapped. You should always kind of find some kind of enjoyment and love in what you're doing. Well, here's a guy who's, he's there. He can not only tell the story about what it was like to branch out on his own and have to work with one rack in a closet, and then build, the training center to a globally known brand, but also kind of a little bit, I don't want to say exit strategy because he's still in it, but have an exit strategy that he does what he loves to do, and so that's the cool thing about this whole summit is everybody's bringing something different to the table. So it's whoever's going to come is going to find what they're looking for.
Excellent. So we've got Chris Cooper next on the list here.
Chris, I've known on and off for longer than I thought I did, and which was really interesting when we spoke because I'm like, who the fuck, and there's kind of dialogue going back and forth. I'm talking like 20 years, a long fucking time, and it took me a while to be able to remember who the fuck he was, and I spoke at one of his events earlier in the year and was totally impressed with what was coming out of his mouth, and he's got a business where he helps, CrossFit box owners become more profitable, how to run their business. And the things that he was saying were things that you would think you should know, but you don't. It's like, when's the right time to increase pricing? How do you know that? What equations can you use for that? Well, he's got answers for that. When should you expand? When should you, constrict? And, just from listening to him speak there, when we started to throw the ideas together for this, to me, it was a no-brainer. It's like this guy, he has to be here because he's going to cover, the number part. He's going to get down to very specific questions that people are going to want to have, and I forget how many clients he has, 300 or 1,000 clients or something like that. So he's worked with, hundreds, if not thousands, of gym owners to be able to help them become more profitable. So he's not going to be presented with something he hasn't seen before. People ask me about stuff. Fuck, it's new to me almost every time. It's not what I do. It's all he does. So he also owns his own gym. I think he had two, and he just constricted it down into one. But there again is branching off into a whole other, conversation that's being added to the summit.
All right, next we've got Steve.
Steve has been one of my advisors for over a decade. He worked for a few Fortune 500 companies and mergers and acquisitions. So he's a numbers guy, man. He's the financial guy. So
gotta have it. And
he understands this industry because out of all the advisors I have, he's one of the ones I relied on the most, because you have to know your numbers when you're in business. You simply have to know your numbers. Anybody that tells me that they don't know or they don't give a fuck or they leave it up to somebody else is a fucking moron. You have to know your numbers. And he knows it at a level higher than what I know. And he knows what I don't know. I don't even know what I don't even know. That's the void that's being filled with that. And it was a position that we really needed years ago and that I should have had 10 years ago. But there's also a expense, that comes with, your when you start bringing in people at, what they would call C-level, CFOs, CEOs and stuff like that, you don't bring in entry level. You got to bring in somebody that can take the business to an entirely different level and then have trust and faith in what they're doing. So he can be able to present on not just that aspect of what he's known since he's been here, but he can present on, he's been a part of every big mistake I've ever made. And big has put me out of business big, you know, so he as soon as I would contact him with it, he knows why it happened. You know, it's like, fuck, you know, but these come out of left field, you know, you don't know. Because I didn't know what I didn't know. If I knew it, I never would have got hit with it, you know? And so he's able to put those things out there to say, look, these are things that are important. If you don't take care of these things because you don't know about them, they will put you out of business, guaranteed. You know, I was lucky a couple times, just flat out lucky to be able to survive some of the things that I went through.
And going back to kind of the mentorship thing, that's why it's important to evolve those folks that you associate with over time into that advisor role, or in this case, an employee.
Yes.
So I think that kind of brings it full circle a little bit. But next on the list here is Dave Tate. What's he going to bring to the table?
Not a lot. You know, I'm gonna.
I doubt that.
You know, I'm going to introduce. I'm going to motivate, and then I'm going to turn it over to the people that I listen to. Okay. You know. A lot of the people that are presenting are people that I depend on to be able to help me with the business. So, you know, I will bring myself, you know, pacing back and forth, ranting, or whatever, you know, comes to mind. I can't really say what I'm going to speak about until I see what everybody else is going to speak about. I'm not going to duplicate, you know, anything. So if I see any holes or any gaps, because in my ego, I know our market better than any of these, because these guys are not in the elite FTS market. You're not in the market of the people who would sign up for these things. So if I see any gapping holes, then I will present, you know, on what they are. But my thing is just letting people know what the hell they're in for. I mean, regardless of what path they're going to take, you know, it's anybody can get up there and tell you the golden story and how great it is and what you need to do and all this other kind of stuff, but nobody gets up there and tells you, you know, you might want to think fucking twice about this, because it's not what you think it is. It never is. And the grass is always greener. There's many days that I want to call up JL and say, dude, will you hire me as a trainer? You know, it's always greener on the other side. So
okay. So I was able to check out the trailer for the West Side versus the World video, and I know in the past you've hashed on a lot of the, you know, the experiences you had at West Side. What do you think this documentary does? What does it do for the culture that surrounds that environment?
I don't know, man, because nobody's seen it except Louis.
Yeah.
You know, you just know the conversations that I had in the trailer. So I don't know. I really don't know. If I was to guess, I would say you're going to see, you know, some people that are villains, you know, people that have been through West Side that maybe feel, you know, Louis owes them or Louis fucked them or something, some way or another. And you'll see other people that, you know, think that Louis helped them tremendously. You know, I'm of the side that I give that man more credit than anybody in my life for where I am right now. So I just don't know, because I don't know the training footage that was shot. The producers have not said shit. And I was one of the first people that Mike Fahey called, you know, to discuss different concepts on the direction that this would go and how it would go. And all I knew is that Louis wanted to make it all 100% about training, but that wasn't going to be the direction it was going to go. And then he didn't want to do it on and off for many years. Okay. So God, Fahey would be great to present at this thing, because the patience that he had to have, you know, the number of times he was thrown out of the gym and the number of times Louis changed his mind is remarkable. But he still, you know, he got it done. So I hope that it shows the side of Louis that we all know that trained there. You know, he was a coach. before anything else. He wasn't, a friend. He wasn't a father. He wasn't, for me, he was a training partner. But his role was to make you better in any way he could make you better. And some people were okay with it. Some people, after they left, weren't okay with it. So I'm excited. I'm probably more excited to see it than anybody else, because you don't know what everybody else said. I will be able to know if what they said is bullshit. That
You were there, yeah.
Yeah. That I'll know. So.
That's all I really wanted to cover today.
Okay.
I really appreciate you sitting down, and this was
great.
awesome for me, and I'm soaking it up. So I really appreciate it, Dave.
Very good.
Yeah. Well, Christmas is right around the corner, Dave. Harry recommended that we close out the podcast here with a little jingle. Are you up for that? Harry? Maybe we'll have to Harry Selko.
A jingle.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Maybe we'll rehearse a little bit, and if we do this again,
you can do the jingle. I don't know
okay,
what the fuck
we'll do it next time.
Yeah.
We're good. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to think about this. What's a fucking jingle?
Yeah, it could be anything. Yeah.
Your balls swinging,
Yeah.